Well, today we have a special guest. Her name is Kira. She's a single parent of two kids, biologist, and zoologist. Welcome, Kira.
Hi.
I'm happy to see you. Thank you for coming. Before we dive deep into zoology and biology, can you tell a couple of words about your transition and how you explored your gender identity?
Coming out as trans. I came out in trans in November 2020. And it went down like a really big rabbit hole actually. I couldn't figure out why I was feeling such a way I was. And I grew up in the 90s. So knowing about gender expression just wasn't really something I knew about growing up. So I ended up going down like a huge rabbit hole, reading a lot of other stories about how other trans women, realizing that my story kind of felt the same as them, kind of linked together. And then in November 2020, I came out as trans, and then in January 21, I transitioned socially.
Have you started medical and social transition in the same period?
Yeah, rough. Well, no, my social transition was more in January 2021,
Mm.
and then I started to medically transition in April 2022. I started HRT, and now been on HRT since then.
I admire your experience of being a single parent of two kids. I know how hard it can be sometimes. At the same time, it's exciting. I know these warm feelings that you have as a parent. But what struggles or challenges do you meet as a parent after transitioning?
Yeah, this transitioning as a parent, it was more difficult than I thought. I think it's more of the social backlash that I get the most. So, especially with the school run, I get some of the parents will stare at me, make comments. Um, when I'm outside, people will stare at me. So it's just kind of, I find it's more difficult and trying to avoid certain prejudices, especially within the trans community. We're always accused of so many things, told to stay away from children, not to do this, not to do this, blah 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 blah. So having been a parent and having two children who live with me full time, I have to face a lot of that judgment quite regularly. It's not fun.
And what about the school administration and teachers?
The school as a whole, they're actually pretty good. So my little one calls me mummy, which I think is kind of cute. And the school have adapted to that. They, when they're bringing her when I pick her up at the end of the day at school, they call me mummy. They say, "Oh, mummy's here." So the school are actually quite welcoming, and they have tried to make it feel more inclusive and make me feel more included. So the school as a whole is actually really good. It's essentially the parents. And I said it to my friend, is like a lot of the parents there still have the high school mentality, unfortunately. So and then they project that onto other people. But it's not just me, they're judgy with but mostly more judgy with me, but essentially a lot quite judgy anyway.
And what about bullying in school?
No, neither of my children get bullied at all. My eldest, everyone knows that I'm trans. They all know that I do social media. And she never gets any issues, and neither does my youngest. My youngest is still quite young, but never not experienced any kind of bullying from them, so for them too.
I often receive questions about coming out to my kids. What was your story?
I think coming out to my eldest was more nerve-wracking because they were a lot older, but they accepted it straight away. It was kind of, "Hi, my name's Kira, I'm trans," and they were like, "Oh, you look great." And that was it. Coming out for my youngest, again, that was such an easy transition. And she knows exactly everything. She's asked questions, and I've been honest with her, and she's just fully accepted it without, any concerns. So she's just kind of.
Awesome. Kira, let's switch to biology. Nowadays, social media are full of appeals to biological truth in any discussion related to trans people and transitioning. I guess you're the only person who has more knowledge and like real knowledge about this truth and about biology. What is the biological truth of being transgender?
So this is a topic I love talking about, and I have talked about this quite a lot. In nature, as that's where my speciality is with animals. So within nature, the prospects of transitioning is extremely normal. It happens to a lot of species. And I think it's important for people to remember that humans are animals. We are a species of animal on this planet. So we are bound by the laws of evolution. We will evolve. And the aspects of biological transition happens quite a lot in nature. As much as it doesn't happen in humans biologically, it's more, socially, more of a social construct. It eventually, in the future, there is a high possibility that humans can evolve to have the ability to transition biologically. It's all a part of evolution and how evolution will work.
Are you referring more to social transition or changing the body, like medical transition?
All of it. All of it. It's kind of within trying to find a way to explain it properly. So in the future, our bodies will adjust and adapt to surrounding environments, and especially if we are using artificial medication at the moment, HRT, for transitioning, our bodies will adjust to that especially through our children, through different generations. So eventually it could be a possibility that humans can transition as and when. Today, in human society, gender is wholeheartedly a social construct. You change your outside appearance to match how you feel on the inside. And it's more of a social thing than more of a biological thing. Does that make sense?
Yeah, sure. I've read the research online about biological reasons of gender dysphoria. Trans people have brain structures more shifted to their gender identity, not to their sex assigned at birth. Is it true?
Yes, it can be an aspect of chemical fluctuations within the brain, within the body, that can alter a person's perspective on how they see themselves. It's also the same as a lot of with, ADHD and stuff. It's everything is physical or on a chemical level. So for being trans, there is a social aspect of a chemical level of how we feel inside as well, and how our brain chemistry works.
So it's a combination of two factors, of social and also the brain structures.
Yeah, I'd agree. It's definitely a combination of both social and biological from a chemical point of view. But on a physical point of view, I think we are not able to we are able to physically transition through surgery and medication, but we aren't able to physically transition on a deeper biological level of being able to, for instance, there's certain species out there that can change at will. And as humans, we're not able to do that at the moment. And I would count that more as a biological transition when that's able to happen without an added, what's the word I'm looking for? Outside perspective. So without surgery, without medication or anything. So that would be more of a biological transition. And with us, it's a social and biological. And again, it comes into the same aspect of evolution. We are evolving. So it will be a possibility.
Talking about non-binary people, what is the reason of their existence of non-binary people?
I guess it's people who don't feel either side or gender. Again, it's the same thing that happens in nature. It's completely a natural thing to have within the animal kingdom and within us. I guess it's just I've not really known much about non-binary as a gender scope, but I know a lot about non-binary and reproduction within asexual reproduction and stuff within animals. So there is a lot of animals, marine life that are essentially non-binary.
Yeah, recently I had a conversation with a trans woman. She was offended because someone called her a biological male. Is it correct to call trans women this way? And why or why not?
It's not correct. If it's used in an aspect of a derogatory term, so if you're saying it to offend someone, then that you shouldn't be doing that. That's not anyone's aspect of an importance of what's under other people's clothes, what their biology is. It doesn't really matter. And if you're calling someone a biological male as a way to insult them, hurt them, or anything, it's essentially just transphobia. There's no word around that. It's essentially just wholeheartedly transphobia. If it's talking about medical and it's talking with medical professionals and use it as a medical term, then essentially biological male is correct. Well, I wouldn't say it's the correct term to use, but when it comes down to all medical, then using the concept of male, it shouldn't be a bad thing. Male bodies are completely different, react completely different to medication, certain treatments. So talking to your doctor and them saying, okay, right, yeah, we understand that you're male, you're assigned male at birth, so we're going to have to do this treatment. That's fine, but in a term of using it to insult someone, I think that's just pure transphobia.
So it depends mostly on the context of using this word.
Yeah, definitely. I believe it definitely believes on the context. If a doctor called me, said I was biologically male, whilst we're talking treatment and discussing, for instance, surgery options, medication, I wouldn't be offended because I am essentially biologically male. So they're helping me get the right care that I need to achieve my transition goals. Whereas if someone was to say, "Oh, you're like all the comments I get on TikTok and social media, or biological male, man, all of this," that's an aspect of transphobia, just to hurt someone.
I know recently you had a public talk about animals transitioning both physically and socially. Can you tell
Yes.
more details?
Yes, within nature, as I mentioned before, there are a lot of animals that do physically transition, socially transition. For instance, for one, my favorite one is clownfish. All clownfish are born male, and they have this will answer go into another question that you probably ask it further. Clownfish are very matriarchal, so they'll have an alpha female, and then all of the others with beta males. So if, for instance, anything happens to the alpha female, one of the beta males will then transition to female. It's a whole chemical process of dissolving the testes, everything, and it's such an interesting process. And then that they will then become the alpha female, being able to lay eggs and help the species continue. But that's not just the only thing that does it. We have common tree frogs. They're able to transition between male and female depending on the population around them. So if they're heavily population of male, one of them will transition to female. Or if it's heavily populated of female, one of them will transition to male. It's such an interesting thing, and that's obviously that's the chemical biological transition. But an aspect of non-binary as well. In nature, we have a lot of species that have both male and female reproduction. They're able to reproduce asexually, which means they're able to reproduce by themselves. For instance, I'm going to use a banana slug. The banana slug is able to reproduce by itself. And Komodo dragons, surprisingly, they're able to lay viable female eggs. All eggs will be female, but they're able to lay viable eggs without a mate. So it's kind of nature as a whole is so much more interesting when you look at it without the judgment of gender around it. To see nature's such an amazing thing. I love it.
But what is the reason of this process of transitioning? What causes the actual fact of these chemical reactions?
It could be down to anything, environmental factors, stress levels, population, whether there's abundance of males, abundance of females, whether or not. It all depends on the aspect of environmental factors. That could, the possibility, like, for an animal to transition. So it's all based around them factors, which is such a quite interesting thing.
And what about mammals? Do they transition?
Not as such, but I think more socially. The transitioning, well, there is a term that I don't like to use, but it is a correct term to use. And it's not as essentially in mammals, but it is in animals that are like avian species. We've got like lobsters, insects and stuff that do breathe oxygen, but not mammals. And it's the term I don't really like using it, but it's a term called bilateral gynandromorphism. And it's where, if, for instance, if you have a bird, it'll be the straight line right down the middle. One side will be male and one side will be female. It's such an interesting thing to see. It happens in lobsters. You can get like lobster. I don't know if you've seen where you have a lobster with one half's blue, one half's red. They're very rare, but one half is male and one half is female. It doesn't happen much in mammals, but it happens. Being trans is a social thing within animals. For instance, there's a species of ape that I cannot remember the species. I'm not sure if it's a bonobo or a bobo, one of the two, where one of it was a male, part of the male collective, and they had socially transitioned to female, and it was completely accepted. They were allowed to stay behind and look after the young. They wouldn't go out foraging. They would basically take on an entire female role, but they were male, and it was completely accepted. So there is evidence that transitioning socially within mammals is there. Although it's very limited, we can't apply a completely humanistic approach to animals, because I can't ask my cat if she's female. She can't tell me. So to apply something that's completely human to animals is impossible. But we can observe and see what would gender mean for animals. Do they experience gender? Is it gender what they're experiencing? But then it opens a wider question of should we even be redefining what gender means? So it's a complete whole new study, especially within mammals. But within marine life, it's very common.
How long does this process of transitioning takes?
Some couple of weeks, it depends. There's no really guideline to it. I think I read up on clownfish takes probably around about a week.
For the whole chemical process to change the body.
Yeah.
That's amazing.
It's insane. It's like the whole body would change.
I'm so jealous.
I know, same. Oh, I wish that was such a possibility. I've always wanted to be a clownfish, just because I can, like, yeah.
For people, it takes ages.
Yes.
Yeah. Also, I want to ask you, recently we heard that the president of the United States, Donald Trump, claimed that $8 million were spent on making mice transgender. Where was this money actually spent? And just of curiosity, is it possible to make mice transgender?
So I can't really comment on the aspect of Trump. I think it was all some bogus thing that he spent it on random thing and just made up this thing that came out. And it reminds me of the time when I can't remember what it was. They were going around and saying something in the waters making the frogs gay. It was a whole thing years ago. You can't make anything transgender, especially a mouse. You can't make anything transgender. So the aspects of having transgender mice are non-existent. When I said something about that, I could not stop laughing. It was hilarious. So I can't really comment on the American political system and how Trump has doing what he's doing. I disagree completely, wholeheartedly disagree with what he's doing. And I have a lot of friends in America, and I do feel so bad for them. They are suffering quite a lot. But to use the aspect of changing animals to transgender, one, Personally, I believe it's physically impossible because, again, as I mentioned before, I can't ask my cat if she's female. So you can't force transgender on anything. It's completely bogus. In my professional opinion, I think it's completely bogus.
What is the importance of exploring and researching transitioning in wildlife? How we can use it regarding to people?
I think it's extremely important to look at how nature, as I mentioned before, we are animals. So it's important to research all animals on the aspect, and especially animals that transition, and fully understand how everything works. It pushes barriers, it pushes boundaries, it challenges people's way of thinking. Like my last talk that I did, it was called "It's Not Natural," because being transgender, I'm always told it's not natural. So I did this talk, but it is natural, and to show that being trans and transitioning and different social social statuses is completely natural within nature, more natural than people think. So to study it and to show the world it hopefully will challenge people's way of thinking. We will be eventually then be able to change society's outlook on being trans as myself. And I think that study will help that, to say, well, we are animals. Well, actually, animals do transition. So it is a normal thing to happen within human society, just as much as it is within the animal societies.
We can use it as a way to normalize
Yeah,
trans.
yeah. It's very important to use like factual evidence that we can actually physically see. Like a lot of people have said to me, well, animals don't do it. They do. And here's the proof. So it's really good to break down them barriers. So it's quite important.
For the interview, you also told me about another public discussion that you had, the roles of males and females in wildlife.
Yeah.
What are the basic principles of these differences?
Well, this is a new talk that I'm currently developing at the moment, and it's going to be called "Challenging the Patriarchy."
Mm.
So again, it comes down to how nature is completely different to how we see ourselves, and nature is primarily matriarchal. There's there's a lot of species that are patriarchal, but there's a lot more species that are matriarchal. Like we've got bees. Bees are a matriarchal society. Ants, termites, they're all matriarchal. All the ants you see wandering around on the floor, they're all female. Same with bees. All the buzzy bees you see, they're all female. For the males, they have different names. So the flying ants, they're called elates, and they're male. They absolutely provide nothing for the colony. They're actually basically just a burden in society, in that kind of thing. It's the same with ants, bees. We have the anglerfish, which I love talking about this because recently an anglerfish swam up. All anglerfish that we see are female. They're around about 3 to 4 foot long, and they're female, all of them. And the males are extremely tiny. They're like this big, like really tiny. I say a couple of centimeters. And because they live in such a vast environment, no walls, they've never seen a wall in their life. They've never seen daylight, apart from that one that swam up. So when they do kind of meet, like a male and female, the male will bite onto the female and secrete an enzyme which fuses the lips with the female. And then essentially the male then becomes a parasite, lives off the female, all the nutrients it needs, everything, and just completely attaches itself to her. And I think it was only recently discovered that they were male anglerfish, whereas science previously thought they were either gross or, skin tags like normal people get. So the male will attach himself to the female and basically just be a parasite and live off her. So anglerfish, again, are completely matriarchal. There's same as in when we talk about mammals as well. There's species of cows that they're matriarchal. That it's the females that decide where to go and when to go. So there's not very much species that are heavily patriarchal, except when you look at, for instance, chimpanzees, gorillas, the great apes. They're very patriarchal. Lions, they're essentially sort of patriarchal, but mostly matriarchal led. So you'll have the alpha male, which lays around nothing, but the females are the ones that basically do everything and organize everything. So it is a more of a matriarchal society even within lions. But as humans, it's heavily patriarchal, and there's no research in to prove why that would even be necessary. We have the constant argument and sayings, oh, what would you do without us men? I mean, the bees do quite well on their own. You know, they have all the males in there are useless. All they use, like, I don't know what I can say, but I'll say anyway. So basically, males in bees, their only sole purpose is reproduction. So when they mate, the testicles will explode, and that will die, and then the queen will go on and then create an entire colony. The male octopus's sole purpose is to mate. They have 8 arms, and one of them is a penis, and they'll detach it, throw it at a female. She'll then keep hold of it until she has a supply of sperm, and then the male octopus will swim off, won't eat, won't do anything, and just die. It's such a weird thing. It's like males within nature are not important at all. So that's why I'm creating this talk, to show that there is not a necessity for a patriarchy. It's not needed.
And from biological point of view, the point of view of science, will humanity benefit of becoming matriarchal society?
I think yes. As I've mentioned before, there's very few species that are patriarchal, and as much as they are successful, I think in our society, a patriarchal society within ours is not needed. It's exploited too much. It's used to stop women from progressing further in their careers. It's used for women to look down on women. Women are constantly pushed down of, you do this, you do this, you're supposed to be in the kitchen, you're supposed to be cleaning, you're supposed to be looking after the children. When in reality, in nature, that doesn't happen. It's mainly, it doesn't even happen in the chimpanzees. The women stay behind, females stay behind, look after the children, stuff like that, whilst the males go off and gather berries and stuff. But within human society, the patriarchal is so heavily drilled into us that it's becoming oppressive, sometimes violent. In our society, it's not needed. I don't believe we don't need to be a patriarchal society.
Am I right that male species, they're more aggressive than female, usually?
It depends on the species. So males are essentially within a species, their sole purpose is essentially protection. So that's why you'll have the alpha male, and that has, for instance, we'll use a lion, for instance, that has a pride of females. Their sole purpose is essentially just protection. And that's protection from predators, other males that might try to come in, but that's essentially all it really is. It's just a protection thing, and it's something that happens through nature. And one of the things I really hate is when men will say, well, men are around, who's going to protect you? Protect you from what? We won't need it, So it's kind of, there is a lot more aggression within males. Although there are some female-led species that can be highly aggressive. A lot more.
Can you name some?
Again, go down to the ants and the small critters. They're very, they will attack anything. We have the alpha female within the clownfish. She looks after essentially everything. But there are some species that do have like sort of an aggression with the females, but it's mainly male that has more aggression. So I wouldn't say it's balanced on a scale or anything. It's more male over female aggression. but it kind of divides between the both.
I struggle living in a male body, and I knew from the beginning of my transition that I need sex reassignment surgery, or bottom surgery in other words. I have started a fundraiser to cover the costs related to this surgery. Total amount needed $14,750 US. I will leave the link to the fundraiser for this surgery in the description under this video. I would be incredibly grateful for any help, whether through donations or sharing my fundraiser on your social media. Ira, we know that pollution and global warming negatively impact our health. And some mass media claim that it is the main reason of increasing number of trans people. Is it true?
No, I wouldn't say environmental factors are encouraging people to be trans. I think it's more out there, like as we mentioned before, growing up in the 90s, the aspects of gender, transitioning, it was never around. I never knew about it. It was always hush hush. Whereas in today's society, especially with like social media, it's very out there. People know more about it, which a lot more people are realizing. Well, actually, I feel like that. So maybe I'm trans. I wouldn't say it's an environmental factor, but more of social. It's more social media and technology where more people can see, more trans people are more visible. That's the word I'm looking for. Trans people are more visible in today's society than it was many years ago. So I think it's more around that than anything to do with climate change or environmental factors.
And what about wildlife? Can somehow environment impact transitioning in nature? For example,
Yes.
temperature, humidity.
Yes. There's a lot of animals that the environment heavily depends on what their gender would be or sex would be. We have, for instance, sea turtles. Their gender is essentially based on temperature. If the eggs are incubated at a lower temperature, they'll all be male. If they're incubated at a higher temperature, they'll be female. It's the same with bearded dragons. They're able to change their sex or gender within the egg itself, depending on the environmental factors. There are a lot of other species that also do the same. I was actually just reading up on one just to double check, and there's a lot more species that are able to transition from male to female because of their environmental factors. So there's a few of them that I just actually looked up to make sure I was correct in thinking what they were, and I wrote them down. And we have, like, for instance, the humphead wrasse. Depending on when they reach maturity, around about 5 to 7 years old, they're all born female. And when they reach maturity, some of them have the option to change to male, and that all depends on the environmental factor. Are there enough females? Are there enough males around in the area? So there's, yeah. Sorry, I got distracted and sidetracked.
And we often hear from right-winged social media these stories of detransitioning. They put it in front. Does detransition happen in wildlife, in nature?
No. Well, we've got no aspect of documentation or studies whether, for instance, an animal has detransitioned. There are species that are able to transition from male to female at will. So that's in the documentation we have. We have the hawkfish. They're able to transition depending on their social infrastructure. So, but they can transition from male to female at will. So it's not essentially, there's no study within animals that have detransitioned, but there is a lot more study in animals that have transitioned and continue to live on past thing. But within wildlife, detransition isn't something that's ever been noted, observed, or anything.
Right. Now let's switch to social topic. Recently, I had an interview with a trans woman from the UK, Sammy, and we spoke about her experience of living as a trans woman. What is yours? You're also from the UK.
So my aspects of transition socially within the UK is I would say I was probably most likely very lucky. So in within the UK, I've not experienced. I think I've only ever really experienced like transphobia twice outside on the street. I face it a lot more online than I have in socially when I've been walking down. I've been misgendered a few times, but I kind of move on from it. It's just kind of not going to see you again in my life, so I don't really care, kind of thing. But it depends on where you are within the UK, I guess. So I've been kind of lucky. I originally grew up in England, but now I live in Wales. And although it is part under the UK government, it is still a different country. And I would say, for instance, the NHS works a lot better where I am. I went through all of everything I needed to within about 2-3 months to start HRT. When I was in England, I was waiting 2-3 years, whereas the waiting lists can go up to 10 years in England. Whereas in Wales, the waiting list is max 2 years, and they keep it at that. So I guess I've been kind of quite lucky within my transition to be able to have all of that support from obviously the Welsh side of things, but within England, it is, as I said, it is shambles. It is such a terrible place. Specifically, a lot of gender clinics are overwhelmed. There's not enough funding, and especially when the government is using trans people as either a scapegoat or a battering ram, as a political pawn. This is how the UK is seen, and there's no funding into transgender healthcare, especially in England. Whereas in Wales, it's a lot. I wouldn't say it's perfect, but it's significantly better than what it is in England.
I remember Sammy shared her experience, and she also said that probably it will take her 2 or 3 years to medically transition and go through NHS system.
Yeah, that sounds about right. It can be longer depending on where you're from in the UK. If you're in, for instance, I think my original gender clinic was Exeter Gender Clinic. Their waiting list was around about 10 years, and that was just for a consultation. That's no hormones, that's nothing, that's just to talk to you. London, it can be up to 15 years. Manchester, it could be 8 years. And that's just for a consultation. So to get things sorted within 2 to 3 years in England, it's not possible. Like there's a lot of people who are now going private for medical transition. Gender GP, a lot of people are using Gender GP to, just get access to HRT as it is. The UK medical professionals don't work with the gender GP either, so they make things a lot more difficult. So for blood tests, observations, or anything, that's also done privately. Like when I first started my transition, I started privately for about 6 months, and I can tell you from that I spent thousands on just HRT, just to get blood tests, observations. These thousands of pounds I could have saved to put towards surgeries, but instead I was paying thousands of pounds just to get the bare basic HRT, which is required. Well, I'm not saying it's required. Like transition is based on your own aspect. You don't have to take out HRT to transition. You don't have to have any surgeries. Whatever your transition is for you is you. But for me, it was medically, and I spent a lot of money to get that. And none of the GPs, none of my doctors were working together with Gender GP. They wouldn't do shared care. So even then, it was a huge battle. But then when the Cardiff Gender Clinic took over of my care, everything was fast-tracked so fast. I think I had everything sent over from the Gender GP, all the psychiatrist things, everything was sent over. And they got back to me within a week, and they were kind of like, okay, we'll get blood tests. Got the blood test, and then I think about 2 weeks later, I had a prescription in the post. So it's kind of, that's what I mean. I was kind of lucky. It was heavily fast tracked, but that was only because I was on list for about 2 years in England, over 2 years. So it's expensive to go privately. The healthcare system won't work with the private clinics. But once you are on the waiting list, especially once you've got past the consultation stuff, HRTs, easy to access. On surgeries, I inquired 2.5 years ago about gender reassignment surgery, and I'm still waiting to talk to someone about it. So it's kind of yeah, and I think up until 2002, I think it was, or 20, I can't remember if it was 2022 or 2020, the NHS completely stopped, because you used to be able to get top surgery, bottom surgery on the NHS, but when the Tory government took control, they completely abolished top surgery for trans women, but trans men can still get top surgery. So it's slowly being taken away. And I know a couple of my trans friends and stuff, they're obviously really worried, and I feel, in my mind, I feel a lot of them are rushing the transition because of these changes that are being made. And that's not a very healthy way to transition. To be like, I've got to do this, I've got to do this now, it's going to be taken away, I've got to do it now. But that's the way the UK government is going, especially around transgender healthcare. It's eventually all of it is going to be taken away. So at the moment, I'd say it's not great, but it's not bad in Wales. In England, it's horrific, but I think in a couple of years, it'll be non-existent.
Notice any political changes, especially during recent couple of months?
There always have been a lot of political changes, even through, depending on what government we've had. Previously we had obviously the Tory government, which would be Rishi Sunak. It basically used trans people as a political pawn. To fix their agenda, they would use being trans as we are the devil of society, just to get what they want. But they put such a bad name on trans people that they're targeting everything. For instance, we are slowly having our rights taken away from us. Currently, a few of the rights that we've had taken away so far is we are not, after any healthcare surgeries, we are not allowed to go on female wards. We have to go on an all-male ward, even after gender reassignment surgery, all-male ward. If a trans person was to ever go to prison, regardless whether they have a gender reassignment surgery, a gender certificate, whatever, they will go straight to a male prison. Same with the aspects when it comes to bathrooms. I don't know if it's actually gone through or whether it will go through, but it's basically a law to say that trans women can be ejected from women's toilets. We can be physically removed. That's just on the basis of England. So the rights and around the political stance, trans rights are being taken away very slowly, but they're doing it without people knowing about it. So something will come up, they'll make a big thing about it and then pass a law. That's nothing to do with what's going on. So there isn't many people that can petition about it. Plus, obviously, transgender content is so very heavily suppressed online. As much as people don't want to admit it, it is very suppressed. I've been a content creator for years, and I've noticed over the years that a lot of my content I create isn't reaching what it used to. I used to do live streams on TikTok. I talked to 300-400 people. I barely even talked to 25 people. I'd post a video. Sometimes it'd get 20,000 views, 30,000 views. I'm barely even hitting 1,000. But because of everything so suppressed, nobody knows about it. And they're easily to push them under the rug and pass laws that shouldn't need to be passed. So in political sense in England and the UK, it's becoming worse. So now trans people are targeted by different groups. It doesn't matter who you are. You will be targeted by everyone, whether Reform UK, the Conservatives. Luckily, Labour's not too bad, but Keir Starmer is still very anti-trans and transphobic. So it doesn't really matter. There's very few people within the government that are fighting for the rights of trans people. They would rather happily debate over a pay rise than whether trans kids want to live, in my sense of how the government runs. And also puberty blockers have all been banned. Transgender healthcare for anyone under the age of 18 is banned as well. And that was recently a law that was recently passed, I think, in the last year or so.
Am I right that it is only the political scapegoating? The society is mostly neutral.
Yeah, I'd say it essentially depends where you are. Again, I know a lot more people that don't care that I'm trans. I'm very visible in my community. I've always been visible in my community of where I am. I've always had a very stable post. One of the places I lived, I was helping lead a project into biofuel to help the town become more economically friendly. No problems there. I've lived in cities. No one really cares. And the one thing I've always said to someone is, how many people do you look at when you're shopping? You don't. It's the same with everybody else. Nobody's looking at you. But because it's prevalent in social media, it's all in the government. And there are people that still have that hate, but I say it's dwindling slowly.
Right. In the end of every interview, I ask my guests about hope. Is there any hope for our community to see positive changes? And what should we do?
I actually have this conversation quite a lot with my friend, and my answer is always going to be the same. Not in my lifetime. Not in our lifetime. We need to experience drastic change before anything will be noticed. And given how being trans is so used in politics, in a lot of countries, like even in certain countries, it's illegal to be trans. It's illegal to be gay in Rwanda, I think. Still, there's nothing's going to change within our lifetime, and for things to change, we need to continue to be more visible. And I know it sounds horrible to say, but we have to show society that we're not the demons that people are creating us to be. We're just average, normal people that want to live our lives and don't want to do anything. We don't want to get involved. But until that happens, I don't think society will change in a long time, and primarily probably not in my lifetime. Sorry to leave on that note, but I've always had that saying. I don't think things will change anytime soon, but to get the change that we need, we just have to keep going with what we're doing and showing people that we're not the monsters. We're not, people that you accuse us of being. We're just average, normal people. And me living my life with my 2 children, you, for instance, in your podcast, your interviews, your YouTube channel, you're showing people that you're just a normal person. And that is what society really needs to see more than what the government is saying about us. And then I think change would start to happen.
I fully agree with you, and I'm so glad we're on the same page. Kira, thank you for your time, for sharing your expertise, your knowledge. Now, when I will have these arguings with right-winged media or influencers about the nature of being transgender, I will just simply send the link on our interview.
Yeah, please do. Send it my way. I'll destroy that. I love doing that. But yeah, it's been an absolute pleasure to talk to you. And I've absolutely, it's really nice to do this. And again, show society that we are just normal people.
It's true. It's true. Thank you so much. And see you.
No worries.